Hi, everyone. Welcome to the In League podcast, powered by She Scores. I'm your co host, Kat Pitré.
And I'm John, here as always.
All right, welcome to episode 8 and welcome to Women's History Month. It's March 7th when we're recording this. So, tomorrow, March 8th, is International Women's Day, which is
Nice.
great. We're excited.
We are.
Um, So we thought we'd keep this episode current, stick with the theme of the month. So we're going to split up the episode into two parts. John's going to kick us off with an overview of the most recent groundbreaking moments surrounding female athletes and women in sports. He's got a few topics teed up for us. And then at the end of the episode, I'm going to go into depth into the PWHPA Dream Gap Tour, which has been the big thing in women's pro sports and kind of elevates the conversation that we're trying to have
Yeah.
during Women's History Month. So, John, what do
Take
you
it
got
away.
for us today?
Take it
Yeah,
away. Yeah. No,
your
I'm excited
moment.
to hear what you have to say. Actually, at the end, it's gonna be good. So obviously, like you said, it is Women's History Month. We are a sports media outlet, so we talk about sports and women in sports. And because of that, I just thought, to highlight some things that I've recently read or just seen. And I think the one thing that has resonated with me recently that I feel like I just want to get off my chest and have
Hmm.
the listeners, talk about is I read Asia Wilson's. For those who don't know, Asia Wilson is a WNBA player. She just won the MVP of the league last season in the bubble. Um, she has a statue. She has a statue at the University of South Carolina. Um, All American in college, one of the national champion. Literally, the resume is outstanding. I actually used to tease Kia back in college because Asia Wilson was so good that I used to tell her, like, when they used to play UConn, Asia Wilson's coming to town, like, have your game ready because she's going to give it to you guys. So I've always been a fan of hers. I actually had the luxury to meet her back in Vegas 2 years ago, and she wrote an article for the Players Tribune called "Dear Black Women." She also did one before called "Dear Women" as well. And I read the article and I thought it was great overall. Like, it was so vulnerable. It was obvious that, like, when you can feel somebody's emotions being poured
Hmm.
through the lines. I think also us being writers, I think people can also we have a good sense of being like take feelings out of pieces that we read. And I was reading it and I was really drawn into everything that she was saying. And essentially, like, I want people to be able to read it. So I'm not going to spoil too much of what the article is about. But she talked, I mean, not spoil the article, but, I don't want to give every single detail. But the
Right.
article is ultimately about her mental health, being an athlete, things that she's had to deal with, that you don't really notice because she's this mega star. I mean, between her and Breonna Stewart, they're the faces of the they're the faces of the WNBA. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, I mean, I can understand there's probably some pressures, and obviously she coming off an MVP year, and they lost the final. So she dives into all of these topics. Um, but I think the vulnerability of it is what got with me the most, is because one of the things that she said, and I got to read the quote because this is what kind of stuck with me, is how many of us fall into the same pattern? I mean, I have this vision for myself that I feel like I have to meet, not as a basketball player, but as a Black woman in America. As Asia, I feel like I need to handle every situation with grace and poise and positivity. I can't let them catch me losing my cool, right? And then she
Mm.
answered with a question mark. And then she goes on to say, Asia is going to handle her business. Don't worry about Asia. Asia's good. And then the article continues. But the reason why I gravitated to that is because I think one thing from my experiences being an athlete, um, and obviously being also like a Black athlete, is most of like our biggest figures in like Black culture are athletes, are entertainers, um, Barack Obama, and you know what I'm saying. But like most of our
Yeah.
biggest names and like our idols are people we see on TV in like those capacities. It's not really so many like politicians and things of that nature, and which is that's just how things are. But we don't have as many like billionaires to look up to that. Like Michael Jordan, he's a billionaire, but he was an athlete first. That's
Hmm.
how a lot of these Black people in sports or Black people in society who have like this generational wealth. A lot of them started in these type of areas, like as athletes, as entertainers, musicians, and being in that spotlight, there is a certain way you have to carry yourself. And I think the pressures of being a Black athlete, being a Black entertainer is certain things like mental health, you're not really allowed to express that you're going through things, and
Mhm.
you do have to be more solid than most people. And she also talked about in this article about her being in the bubble and everything that was going on in the world in 2020. I mean, yes, we were in COVID-19, but the pandemic that is racism was very loud in 2020. And she even said, like, me being in this bubble, I was I had to be almost numb to everything that was going on
Mhm.
around me, and and it was hard. I think anybody that could witness that video and think come with like an objective thought about everything that they witnessed, and it being like black, like myself, that is emotional trauma. Watching something like that, as traumatic as it is, and when you can physically resonate with the person, it's like that could be you, or that
Mhm.
could be a family member or somebody and that is stressful. I think the George Floyd video, it shook everybody. It was it was traumatizing. It was hard to come to grips with. I mean, the conversations, but during this time, so many people were standing up and protesting. In the WNBA, they were in a bubble because they had to play. They have, like, we talked to Bria. I have a Bria said in our podcast before. I have a kid. I have to feed him. But all these things are happening outside. I have to be here, and that can be traumatizing. And I enjoyed the vulnerability of her article, because I think a lot of athletes need to hear the overall message of what she was saying, because she was giving light to things that are really important. Mental health. There's so many athletes, especially like for the game of football, that have killed themselves from like CTE and not seeking the mental assistance that they needed. Um, and athletes really sometimes just don't know to check on their mental health. I think you get so caught up in training, games, life, that you don't ever have that second to step back and check on yourself. And I think
Mhm.
the other thing that resonated me about this article is that she was giving off this about the black experience. And I think one thing is true is, like, being a black athlete, you do have to carry like this superhero type of persona. You can't really see people can't really see you when you're low. And they don't even expect you to be low. They don't even know that you can have that moment where you feel like, are they okay? Because they look super all the time. And we come to this idea that these type of people they don't have weaknesses. They don't feel things like normal people. Um, and I've personally gone through these things just being an athlete myself. I got in a bit of some trouble at UConn, and from that moment, like, I was in a few forums being talked about like negatively, and that whole moment, I kind of like spiraled. Like, mentally, I just was not there. I dealt with a lot, um, and I don't think I realized it until I got a bit older. I think when I left school to pursue my career in sports journalism, that's when I really started to tap into my mental health, because I was kind of figuring out who I was, because I wasn't an athlete anymore. So I had to figure out who I was, and because of that, I think me having to figure out who I was as a person and what I wanted to do with my life, I had to figure out what I felt ultimately, how I felt ultimately, like in terms of like my emotions and stuff like that. Because I never really took the time to invest in that. And I know
Mhm.
there's a lot of athletes out there who go through a lot. There are a lot of pressures being an athlete. I mean, being the pressures of being a role model to a community. Like, when you're a black athlete, you are a role model to black people. We don't have some of the best role models all the time. And you have to make sure that, there is pressures to show, um, what we can be, what you can ultimately be in your life. And there is pressures to that. And I just thought the article overall was great. Like, it was not a fun, but that's a bad adjective, but that it was
It was a really
it was
great
interesting.
article.
Yeah, it was just really
Yeah.
interesting. And I enjoyed it. And I think, to the athletes who listen to this podcast, it's okay to check on your mental health. And to my black women and black men out there who feel like they gotta be, stone cold all the time, it's impossible.
Mhm.
Like it is impossible. At some point, everybody has a breaking point. You know what I'm saying? Everybody has their anxieties. Everybody has the things that make them uncomfortable, and everybody has a threshold. It doesn't know. You don't know. You may not know when exactly you'll meet the tipping scales of that threshold, but it'll come. And shout out to Asia Wilson because that in the landscape, she's done so many things in her basketball career that have helped inspire a number of young people in the basketball world.
Mhm.
But I think this article is one of those services that she's doing that you really can't pay back. Like it is priceless the amount of gems she dropped in that article just being vulnerable because it's probably resonating with so many other athletes who feel like how she felt in that article. And mental health, I think one thing I'm very like passionate about too is mental health in sports, in athletics, because I do think that is the one thing that I guess now we're starting to put focus into. And I just think that is something that we need to make sure is still in the forefront because we don't always we spend a lot of years failing athletes by not checking up on their mental health.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that struck me about this article, and again, like, we urge everyone out there listening, please do read it because it is an incredible read. But it really is like, I think that you're right, like the vulnerability of it. And I think there's something that we can't repay because it's so, especially when you are in the public eye, to have that vulnerability so publicly and so openly. I mean, that's a really, really difficult thing to do, but it serves so many people. And I think I had a lot, a similar experience where I felt really seen by parts of it and was like, yeah, I really resonate with that. And I think that is what's so important about speaking up in whatever form it takes, whether it be an article or just in your community,
Mm,
especially about mental health, is that in the sports world, there isn't really a precedent for it,
mm, mm,
And I think
mm.
one of the great things about the younger generation, I look at like younger family members and kids around, I feel like there's so much more with it with
Yeah.
mental health. And the rest of
Yeah.
us, we're just trying to catch up. We're still learning about it in the sports world and the sports industry, I think they're a little bit slower on the uptake. And so
Yeah.
there's a lot of really great conversations happening about mental health and how it affects different communities of athletes
Yeah.
um, within the sports industry as a whole.
Yeah. And I think too is like I think you said it best. Like now though, in this generation, we are finally having those athletes who are coming out and talking about mental health. And I think that's what's
Yeah.
great. You know what I'm saying? Like um Katie Lou Samuelson last year put out an article. Kevin Love 3 years ago put out an article.
Hmm.
DeMar DeRozan has put out an article
Yeah.
before. So all these big athletes putting out things like this, this helps the advancement of that. You know what I'm saying? And I think that is overall great. So shout out to Asia for that. I also want to highlight Maya Chaka
Yep.
becomes the. I hope I said her name right. I really do. Um, she is the first black woman to officiate, is going to be the first black woman to officiate at the NFL level.
Hmm.
And ultimately, I was so stoked hearing that because I think now realizing that I'm a football player, like
Yeah.
I will say like the football player in United States is like you are the typical jock that is in like all the shows and there's so much testosterone. It's like I guess if there is a quote unquote the manliest sport that just smells like boy, it is the game of football. And
Right.
I think now seeing that, we have black women that are officiating in these these major games. We have women that are on that. There are two women that just got Super Bowl rings as coaches on staff. You know what I'm saying? And I think overall, like just looking at women being immersed in NFL football in a coaching capacity and able to like interact with athletes, like it's so interesting for me because I kind of wish I got to experience it in college because of what they're doing in the NFL, the ripple effect between little league football to college to high school to your Pop Warner, it is the landscape is going to ultimately change.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And shout out to the women that took the leap of faith to decide I'm going to ref in football. I'm going to put my name into the hat and be selected to be a referee in the NFL. Like that is phenomenal. Like there's going to be a point in time where we're going to have a woman to be the first head coach of an NFL team. You don't know. We don't know when that time is going to
Mhm.
come, but it's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I just wish I say like one thing I do wish that I could grow up. I could play football in this era that is coming. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um, but it is nice though to know that the game that I love so much is changing and changing for the better. You know what I'm saying? Um, so shout out to Maia Chaka for not only being a woman, but like for the black community, like you are paving a road now because there are going to be other people and other children, other young black girls that are going to want to be like you. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Um, and I think the great thing about what's going on in football with the amount of women that are becoming a part of these franchises and a part of the league is not only obviously the for obvious reasons the diversity of it, but do you understand how major like the barriers that are being broken? It is showing that there is no limitations. Like there is a woman right now as the GM of the Seattle Mariners currently.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Like the sports world is changing before our very eyes. And I feel like our podcast is like right on time to
Right.
that because we are coming in with these changes. But I feel like this is truly what the athletics world is always was supposed to be, you know? Like I think this is to me what sport is. Because I
Mhm.
had so many teammates in college. Um, I had teammates. I had so many friends in college that were athletes that were women and they played volleyball and ran track and played basketball. And not once did I ever look and think, we're different type of athletes. We're all the same. And I think, I've always like naturally given that respect. And because of naturally giving that respect, I guess it's always been hard for me to fathom like why don't other people see it that way?
Right. It doesn't make sense
It doesn't
on a
make
certain
sense. You know
level.
what I'm
It
saying?
doesn't make sense.
And I think, and I think obviously, and I think the one thing is like, I'm an athlete. So athletes just respect other athletes. Like, cause
Right.
we get the work that's put in. And so when you're a dominant athlete, like you're gonna automatically get the respect. Like, for example, Clarissa Shields just became the first boxer, man or woman, to win the undisputed championship in two different weight classes in the four belt era.
Mhm.
Clarissa Shields is going to go down as one of the greatest boxers of all time. The same way
Right.
Serena Williams is going to go down as one of the greatest tennis players of all time. There's no gender roles, none of that. They're both at the absolute best at their sport, and at the end of the day, the sport as a whole, there's no black men and women play the sport. You're either good at it or you're not. It's
Yeah.
that simple. And so they're going to go down as two of the best to ever do it. And I just love where like we're going. And I think
Yeah.
though, I think this also ties me back into our viewership conversation in episode one because it's like
Yeah.
now knowing that like not everybody has that same unconditional respect out of just being, um now we need that's why I still think that viewership thing needs to be pushed to the forefront. Twitch, everybody, like
Mhm.
I will still stand on this. Twitch needs to just be starting to pick up most women's sports so that children
Yeah.
can just watch, you know what I'm saying? But ultimately, before I get off my soapbox and hand everything off to you, can let you do your thing, is just being in league podcast has been great for me because I've had to I've worked in women's sports already. I mean, one of my best experience covering professional sports was in Australia, covering the UC Capitals, and I've been so like grateful to women's sports because most of my opportunities have come from me covering women's sports. And so I think that's also made me like this unconditional fan that just watches to watch. I don't think about who's on the court. I just think about what's going on. I criticize athletes the same way I criticize men who play sports. Like if you suck, you suck. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna talk crap. I'm gonna say my thoughts on all types of things. And debate sports the same way. And I just think we're at this place now where anything is possible. You know what I'm saying? It's just
Yeah.
anything is possible. And I'm just excited to see where everything goes. And those are my highlights. Like shout out to Asia, shout out to Clarissa Shields, shout out to Miss Shaka. Like I appreciate the work you've done because ultimately, like I know that it was not easy.
Right.
I know there are probably some barriers you had to go through to get to where you wanted to get to. Um, but you guys are trailblazers and you guys are redefining your sports. Like Asia Wilson, you have a statue at a university that you even said that your grandmother and your grandfather could not walk on. They could not. You have a statue there. You know, like Clarissa Shield is going to be the face of women's boxing for the next, I want to say at least 10 years. She's
Mhm.
going to be the face of it. And it's going, and they had an all, and because of her, when she won those two belts, it was the first all women pay per view. Like we are changing. People were paying to watch you. She's going to be an absolute prize fighter. And at
Mhm.
some point, there's going to be a woman who's going to be the head coach of a franchise. And I really cannot wait to see how that pans out because Godspeed to the woman that does take on this role because you're going to go through a lot.
Right.
But it's going to be great. It's going to be great because you're going to be, it's the barriers. At the end of the day, Jackie Robinson had to integrate baseball. I promise you, it was not easy for him. He probably went through hell with the amount of slander he probably dealt with. So everything's not going to be easy. But I always think if it's going to better a generation, it's worth it.
Totally. And I
And
feel like the message overall is, and one that we can take into this month is, if you can see it, you can be it.
yeah,
And these women are being it.
yeah,
So
no, for real.
other kids out there can also be it
Yeah,
someday.
and feel like you can be a don't and just I think too is it's like there's no limitations. Don't feel like you can't do it because you look away or you're different. There's no
Right.
limitations. But with that being said, that is my I'm bowing out. That is my highlight of this month.
Your highlight reel.
My highlight.
Uh, no, I feel like a lot of what you're saying kind of leads into this conversation we're about to have about the Professional Women's Hockey Association. Let's see how many times we can say that without messing it up. I know. So, if you don't know, the PWHPA Dream Gap Tour is back for the 2021 season. And it was a long time coming. Secret Deodorant invested $1 million into
Nice.
it, which is incredible. It's the largest financial contribution by any company into professional women's hockey. And pro women's hockey is, when you look at it compared to the WNBA and the NWSL, it really falls far behind, which is a shame,
Yeah,
obviously, and it's unacceptable.
yeah, I
You
agree.
know,
I agree.
and if you've listened to this podcast enough, you know I'm a hockey fan. That's
Yeah.
my sport. Like, I, like, love hockey, and so watching the PWHPA Dream Gap Tour, first, they were in New York, hosted by the New York Rangers, an NHL team, at Madison Square Garden, the first
Yeah,
time any
that
professional women's
was
hockey.
I remember that. Yep.
Oh my god, it was
I
incredible.
didn't. I think it's kind of crazy to think that no women have ever played a hockey game in MSG like that.
Yeah,
That's how you know
that's
history is like
insane.
beyond me. It sounds like hearing it out loud is just like I remember reading it. I'm like, that doesn't make too much sense. But
It doesn't make sense.
yeah,
That's why we have this month, you know? And I got a little emotional because I was like, here we are. I'm watching some of the best hockey players in the world, right? These are Olympic gold and silver medalists. These, like Hillary Knight, you have some of these incredible, incredible players out on the ice playing this game that I love, and in a culture, in an industry that is so gender and racially divisive. Like, there's just, it's terrible. Um, it's hard to put into words. So there is such a lack of, like, gender and racial diversity in hockey, and so to watch this, they're starting off the games with a land acknowledgement. That's incredible. We've seen a lot of stuff come out recently on how hockey is addressing racial inequality, from the NWHL and the PWHPA, also in the NHL. There's a lot of growth happening on that side as well, but also in terms of gender inequality. And that's kind of the big conversation with the Dream Gap Tour.
yeah,
So we're going to go back a little bit in history. just to set the stage a little bit, to set the
Yeah.
environment. Because one of the things I think gets left out of the conversation around the Dream Gap Tour, right? They're in New York. They just finished in Chicago. It's the reason they started. They
Right.
were originally only supposed to be around for like one season to kind of fill this gap. Now they're heading into their second.
Yeah.
So the Canadian Women's Hockey League, the CWHL, folded in 2015, I want to say,
Mhm.
maybe a little bit earlier due to financial reasons.
Right.
Out of that, the PWHPA was formed. So the Professional Women's Hockey Players Association. They were an advocacy group, or they are, advocating for a sustainable women's hockey league that pays a livable wage, offers resources like healthcare, and has the infrastructure available to maintain economic viability long term. They're advocating for a league. They're not intending to become a league, but they're advocating for a
Mhm.
league.
Yeah.
So it gets a little bit confusing.
No, but it makes sense though. It's kind of like that's why it's a tour. You go around and
Right.
you show people what you're doing. You know what I'm saying? Like you entertain people because so it's smart. I think the idea is great, and
Yeah.
it's it's disappointing that they have to go on tour to get a league, but I mean it's brilliant. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, you have some of the, again, like the best players in the world showcasing the disparity between men's and women's professional hockey and the fact that there isn't a sustainable professional league for women's hockey in North America,
Yeah,
which is ridiculous.
I agree.
When you think of areas in the world that are powerhouses for hockey, do you think of North America?
I think of Canada.
Yeah, right? Because of the NHL.
Yeah,
That's the largest
right.
hockey league.
Exactly.
Obviously, there's like the KHL, but the NHL is it, right?
Yeah,
They make the most money, they're the biggest,
right.
they're the most visible.
Yeah,
And so it's unfathomable to me that we have the international dominance of USA Hockey and Hockey Canada on both the men's and the women's professional sides. The US women's national team
right,
is one of the best international teams in history.
right,
They've medaled in every single Olympics since 1998, usually gold except for a 2006 bronze, right?
right,
They're incredible.
right.
So we have that. We
Yeah.
have the NHL, which is huge. And but we don't have a women's professional hockey league. And I don't get that. That doesn't
Yeah.
make sense to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. And see, and it's funny too because we've talked about these other leagues that need to how they can build themselves up, but luckily they have leagues though. Like
Yeah.
there's multiple leagues where you can play professional women's hot soccer
Mhm.
around the entire world.
Yeah.
You can play basketball professionally around the entire world, um, not only in the states, but hockey. I feel like the North America should be the mecca for hockey. You know what I'm saying? At least because you have Canada and you have America, and I mean between the two countries, I mean I don't know how there's not like this massive league for women's hockey. And I think the thing that kind of I don't really like about this whole the one discrepancy that gets on my nerves a bit. And I think I told you this is like
Mhm.
this thing between the PWHPA and the NWHL.
Yeah.
I still can't get on board. I think it just doesn't make sense to me. And you know, you got I'm being completely objective here.
Mhm.
Don't be mad at me, anybody that's listening. I'm being completely objective. I don't like it because ultimately, to me, it looks like this. Kat, if you and I, when we first got to In League Podcast, we decided we want to make a podcast discussing topics in women's sports.
Yes.
But you had ideas and I had ideas. And since we couldn't agree to deliver it, we decided to link up with somebody else in She Scores and make a podcast. And then you linked up with somebody else, made a podcast. But we talk about the exact same stuff on the podcast. And maybe just deliver it a little bit different, have different names, but we're talking about the same things that are going
Mhm.
on. You're dividing fan bases, but ultimately it doesn't benefit either of you in the long run because you and I could have linked up together, have all these massive ideas, this this massive pool of creativity. And obviously, we've done that within league.
Right.
But imagine if that's what that looks like to me. It's like
Yeah.
if we decided to go off and do in league podcasts with two other people, but promote it through She Scores and do the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think they need to realize a little bit too that you guys are doing a disservice to to your um to your next generation of hockey players because you're making like you're splitting. You got two things going on, and you guys want the same goal.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like sometimes if the goal is the same, like ultimately, if the goal is to create a league that is sustainable, like you get paid every week, every 2 weeks, you get a check, you get a game check. There are sponsorships, endorsement opportunities, like a league that will highlight everything you are, helps you get brand endorsements to be on commercials and the Wheaties box, all that stuff, you know? Why are you guys dividing yourself? And I think it's just this divisiveness of it. I don't understand it.
Right.
And I'm not all the way involved. I don't know. I don't know every minute detail. But shouldn't the greater good of the cause outweigh any personal discrepancies?
Yeah, and I think you aren't alone in thinking that. And you're right. There's a lot of economic reasons why having two leagues doesn't make sense. And again, the PWHPA isn't a league,
Is
but their players don't play in NWHL. And the big thing is they have the same goal. You're right. And I think their organizations are in relatively good faith. There's a lot
right.
of, they want the same thing, but the way they want to go about creating a professional league is different. So, and you bring up the NWHL, National Women's Hockey League, which was developed in 2015 by then Commissioner Danny Rylan. She's since stepped down. I can't remember off the top of the head who the new commissioner is, and they've recently changed their economic structure. But there's the NWHL. We spoke to Sammy Davis,
Yeah.
who
Shout out
was
to Amy Davis.
shout out to Sammy Davis, an incredible, incredible human being, a
For
wonderful person to
sure.
interview,
For sure.
and the 2020 number one draft pick in the NWHL.
Number one.
And, if you haven't listened to that conversation with Sammy Davis, go check out that episode because it relates to a lot of what we're talking about here. But these organizations, so you have the NWHL, which is not a livable wage.
Yeah.
It has struggled financially uh, ever since the get go.
Right.
And we have so much respect for both of these organizations, by
Right.
the way. One is not better than the other. They're both doing incredible, incredible things. But when they exist concurrently,
Mhm.
along with the added issue of the NHL, which we're going to talk about in a second,
Mhm.
it doesn't make sense.
Right.
And you're absolutely right. And the other issue linking into the NHL, so the league that the PWHPA is advocating for, that they're looking for, most likely won't be possible without some sort of intervention by the NHL.
Right. I
Right? You think about the WNBA and the NBA.
agree.
They're looking for that same sort of relationship.
Right.
A, because it's been proven to work
Right.
economically and culturally. It has been a huge success. And it's been to the benefit of both the NBA and the WNBA.
Right.
It has, I would say, at this point, only positives.
I agree.
Um, and the NHL is not interested in that
Mhm.
at this point in time. And they have said, and it's complicated, and we obviously don't know all the details. But one of the reasons that they have said is because they don't want to create their own professional women's league affiliated with the NHL while the NWHL still exists. And they don't want a partnership with the NWHL. So you have this complicated relationship between the NWHL and the NHL, and the NHL and the PWHPA, and
Mhm.
then this weird little like women's league, but not women's league between split between like PWHPA and NWHL.
Right.
And so it gets really confusing to keep it all straight. And me gets really frustrating as a hockey fan because
Right.
I'm like, I want a professional women's
Right.
league. And I cheer for both the NWHL and the PWHPA.
Yeah.
But to have them split and to have your players split
Right.
and to have everything happening very differently with
Truly,
different
yeah,
structures and
right.
at different times, and they're not really having a consistent conversation about hockey between them and their actions and whatever, it gets really difficult for a fan to see that kind of light at the end of the tunnel for women's hockey. And that is why the PWHPA Dream Gap Tour is so important because I think what they are searching for is out there. And I think a lot of it just depends, honestly, on the NHL.
Yeah.
They have to get involved and they have to be more open about it. It's the PWHPA has partnered with a couple of NHL teams, the Toronto
Mhm.
Maple Leafs, the Calgary Flames, the New York Rangers, the Chicago Blackhawks.
Right,
But those were on like a smaller level.
right.
That's not the NHL necessarily. Like that's not Gary Bettman, who's like the head commissioner of the NHL.
Mhm.
It's not him stepping in and saying, "Hey, we want a formal relationship with the PWHPA."
Right.
It's them saying, "We're okay with a little bit of a relationship, but we haven't yet bought into the idea of a professional women's hockey league in North America."
So I agree. I do think the NHL needs to get involved, but
Yeah.
I don't have that much faith in the NHL. And I'll be honest. I think me spending so much time in Toronto and being in Canada, I've watched, and I think also working with you is I've been trying to adapt and immerse myself in the hockey culture. I don't
Mhm.
think I'll ever be super immersed into it, but I want to be able to talk hockey, understand the game, and I've been doing that. I've been watching a lot,
Yeah.
and so I've been paying attention. I've just been paying attention, and I never, I never really got the vibe that the NHL is. I definitely can tell that there's a racial sub, superiority and divisiveness in the National Hockey League. I think it is very. It shows, um, and unfortunately, I don't think whoever's at the top running hockey is progressive enough, ready and willing to go all the way and try to create something that should have probably been created a long time ago. I think women's hockey, women's professional hockey has been it is not. I don't want to say it has been like its popularity is determined on the NHL, but it has been done a complete disservice by the NHL. You know what I'm saying? Um, and because of that, I feel like screw the NHL. When is there going to be a player from the NHL who's made millions and millions of dollars or invested millions of dollars, or when it's going to be that person who's just like, I'm willing to invest in the league, and because I would do this. Like, let's say I was a billionaire and I had the money. I was a billionaire, right?
Right.
I'd call the head representative of the PWHPA, and I'd call the head representative of the NWHL, whoever the commissioners are, and I get both of them on a phone call, all three of us. And I would say to both of them, I have $100 million to invest into one of these. I mean, I have $100 million to invest in women's professional hockey. And I'd make sure I say it in women's professional hockey, not your league or not your league. So, with me presenting the two leagues this information, what do you guys want to do? You don't think that the PWHPA and the NWHL will let bygones be bygones and come together and do something for the greater good, knowing that not only do they have the financial backing, they can put up their players in whatever city they're in, they can pay for insurance, um, they'll actually be able to get paid, and it's lucrative. And I think the one thing about the NHL that it loses me is the fact that I have not invested really is what do you have to lose? Like, what are you going to lose from this? Because ultimately, if you back the PWHPA or the NWHL or help merge the two, you're only going to gain back revenue because you're going to just be adding more of an audience. You know, like they're going to be more viewers. Like we've both said it on here. When you
Mhm.
open up a demographic economically, it's better. I
It's
mean,
better. You have a
economically,
huge untapped resource.
it's like you're mining and you hit oil. You know, like you got a new constant flow of viewership. I
Yeah.
mean, and so I feel like some of it is arrogance. because it can't be you don't have the money. I think maybe the NHL this year because of COVID, I think it's probably between the NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, they probably don't have the same money as those other three leagues.
They've lost a ton of
Yeah, I
money.
know they've probably lost a lot of money this year because
Yeah.
of COVID. I can
Yeah.
completely get
Oh,
that
yeah.
part.
Yeah.
But prior to that,
Yeah.
2015, like ultimately, the WNBA has been around for almost 20 plus years. This
Yeah.
is supposed to be done 10, 15, 20 plus years ago. So now that you have no money, your excuse can be we don't have any money. But before, where was the urgency? Like, and this is why it brings me back to me telling you before, like, don't understand why there's a PWHPA and an NWHL, and I hate it because it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And like you said as a fan, it is very confusing. I I would be confused too.
Mhm.
Like, and don't get me wrong, I don't. I've watched other football leagues. Like when the XFL is on, I watch the XFL as a Guardians fan. But these are completely new players. It's not like this is somebody left there, half the guys from the league and half the guys from the CFL, and everybody's like trying to integrate into this league that is trying to be combative to the NFL. It's being created so that there is another vessel for football. But that's because the NFL, there's only so many spots and it makes so much money. So we have the ability to have another league that makes money because we already make enough. In this case, in women's hockey does not make enough money to have more than one league.
No.
And
And
I
again,
think
the PWHPA is not a league,
not a
but
league. Yeah, it's not a league. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not
it's
a
not
league.
like
WB,
but what you're saying still rings true and
yeah,
is
but
still
they shouldn't
relevant.
be two separate entities.
Yeah.
They all should be they should all be this under the same umbrella. And I just um I really do feel like both organizations, I mean, like you said, they remain in good faith, but they need to come like they need to both lock themselves into a room and don't leave until y'all come to an agreement.
Right.
Do not leave until there's something done because
Yeah.
it shouldn't be two leagues. Y'all don't have enough money. There's not enough attention. There's no way there should be two leagues.
No, and I think again, the biggest things I have a couple of things to say here. The biggest thing is the NHL getting involved. I think for me, that is because we've seen historically, again, with the NWSL, the WNBA, whatever, and USA Hockey and Hockey Canada need to get involved as well.
Right.
The way that they have subsidized players like the NWSL, right?
Right.
And the US Soccer Federation has subsidized players, right?
Right.
Hockey Canada and USA Hockey need to get involved on that level as
I
well.
agree. I could
And
agree.
the NHL needs to get more involved and they need to be better at what they're already doing, right?
Right.
They're saying we're supporting hockey or women's hockey through promotional events like the NHL All Star Games. All right, do it better, do it more. All right, don't just give them, like a 5-minute showcase on a
Mhm.
commercial break that's not getting aired on TV.
Right.
Give them more and be better,
Wait,
right?
they did that?
Prove it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's like, prove it. You know what I mean? And so there's that. And one of the other things that I think is really interesting as we look ahead to what could happen in the future. And I'll be honest, I don't know if the NWHL is going to be the answer,
Mhm.
um, especially right now.
Right.
But I think the PWHPA is onto something. And I think again it hinges on the NHL. So if we're searching for an example of how the NHL can subsidize and or create and or be a part of a women's professional hockey league, we can look at the KHL,
Mhm.
which is the Continental Hockey League in Russia,
Mhm.
although it's Kazakhstan, Latvia, Finland, and a couple of other countries. And their women's league. They
Right.
have a flourishing women's hockey league, the
Flourishing.
WHL. It's incredible. And what they've done, I follow them on Instagram. I always have to translate their captions because I know like 4 words in Russian. It's but it's wonderful. They treat their players the same way. The players are receiving a livable wage, right? And there's players from North America who've gone over to play for the WHL, and they're like, "Oh my god, we have healthcare.
Yeah.
We have resources.
Right.
We are treated like actual hockey players.
Right.
There's development teams in
Right.
pools for
Mhm.
them, and you do not see that here."
Right.
Right? And so everything that the KHL has done for their men's league is replicated in some way, on some form, for their women's hockey league.
Mhm.
And it is both revolutionary and makes sense. It makes sense.
Right.
And they've gotten huge revenue. I mean, they promote them on their equivalent of the
Mhm.
NHL network for the
Right.
KHL. So they're showing women's hockey on their
Right.
own network. Plus, they have their own events. They have their own media, and it's incredible. And so you look at that and say, okay, they're doing it and it makes sense. And it's not without their own issues, right? They have their own struggles as well. But if they're making a livable wage playing hockey, what the hell? Also, it's not to be ignored, and this is a totally separate conversation, but there's women professional hockey players playing in Swedish men's leagues. So just throwing
Really?
it out there. Yeah.
Really?
And the SDHL.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So it's like, what the hell? Either NHL, hey, draft women's players, you know, make hockey gender equal. I have no problem with that. They can stand up to it. Think of what would happen if you put Hillary Knight and Sidney Crosby on a line together. It'd be incredible. That's another story.
but the
That's
thing is
another
in women's
topic.
hockey, they don't are they not allowed to I think Sammy Davis, so they're not allowed to
You're not
tackle
allowed to check. You're
check, right?
not no, you
I
there's
keep
it
calling
still
it
gets
tackle or check. Yeah, you can't check each other. It's
you
football.
can check each other, and I think that's whatever, that's a
It's soft.
complicated conversation
It's soft. It's sharp and soft. Soft. It's soft. It's soft. Let those women check each other and stop.
because they will. They
Huh?
will. Like, they will. They will check each other,
Yeah,
and
like what are we talking about? Why
it's
are we
fine.
I like
Either
that.
you let women check or you take it away from the NHL.
But you know what I'm saying though is like that. But even the fact that women can't check shows like the culture of hockey is screwed. Like
Yeah.
it shows something like the not screwed, like it can't be repaired. But you know, like those are some of the things like the hockey culture. That, like, why is there just like the game is the
Yeah.
same? You know, the game is the
Yeah.
same. So
Why do they have to wear full face shields
right, like if
and
a
men's hockey players don't?
like if the women in hockey want to have busted open teeth just as much as the men do, let them do it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, they're
I
not
think,
allowed to.
yeah. So
And there is a conversation, we're totally getting off topic here. There is a conversation with men's hockey of, like, making them wear full face shields because people's faces get busted and they
busted.
have big issues, and, like, so that's a whole other conversation, and a lot of it hinges on, like, masculinity and performative
Yeah,
masculinity,
yeah.
right? But at the end of the day, all of this cycling back to the point of this conversation,
Mhm,
the Dream Gap Tour is incredible.
mhm.
It is amazing. It is
Brilliant.
for me as a woman, as a girl who came to hockey late. I didn't grow up around the sport, but I love it so desperately. And as a fan who gets so exhausted having to search for people who look like me or are like me in a sport that I love, in an industry that I work in, and to turn on the TV, to turn on NBCSN yesterday with like the intermission report with Katherine Happen and all of these incredible people, a platform informed that I am so used to watching like the Flyers and like
Right,
NHL teams on,
right.
seeing women playing on that was incredible.
Yeah.
It was insane. And to think that there are little kids out there who are watching female hockey players, maybe for the first time ever, that is absolutely life changing.
Yeah.
And there is no reason that there shouldn't be a professional women's hockey league in North America that has a livable wage, that has all of the healthcare and resources available to them that are equal to the men's league. There's no reason for it.
Yeah,
And it is unacceptable that there isn't one yet.
yeah, I agree. I 100% agree. I mean, I couldn't say any. I can't say it. I think you said it the best. Like it's just don't. It doesn't. It's unacceptable because it just don't even make sense now. You know,
Right.
like
There's
this.
no excuses.
There's no excuses. Yeah, like there's just no excuses, and I think that's also another point. Like I think you're saying it best. Like yeah, the PWHPA tour is awesome and it is brilliant. It is a great idea and so smart, but like we just need one sustainable league and
Yeah.
the league where every all the best can just all go. Nobody has to
You don't have to
come
choose.
out of come out of school and decide I want to play in this league instead of this league. We all just go into the same draft for the same league.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
They're the PWHPA and the Dream Gap Tour is necessary right now,
yeah, I
and
agree.
it is incredible that they exist,
Yeah,
but no excuses
no
for why
excuses.
there isn't a women's professional hockey league.
No excuses. None at all, actually. None at all.
None at
It'll
all.
come though. It's gonna come though. At the end of the day, I feel
Well,
like one thing. If there's one thing I've noticed in sports is
yeah,
it happens eventually.
it
Somebody
happens.
leaves and it goes. And honestly, some things, in the deputy commissioner of hockey, like maybe once he leaves, things may change.
Mhm.
Like unfortunately, I don't know how long that'll be till, but I'm just saying in general, like
Right.
some of the issues in sports is commissioners, higher ups, they're stuck in their ways from 40 years ago, and it's 2021. So
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? So things are,
Yeah.
but I think you said it best. It is unacceptable, and it is about damn time.
About damn time. No, end us on a positive note, please,
Nope.
because again, Women's History Month for all of March. Although, and you said this at the beginning, uh, it should be every day.
Every day.
Women's history every day.
I say all the time, Black history, women's history is every day. It is not just determined in one month.
Right. But this month in particular, we're celebrating
Right.
the incredible women around us. Uh, and so, I mean, I don't
And
know how
tell the
to
folks
end
where
this.
to reach us at.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like a positive note to end on. And I
I
think it's
mean,
the fact that
I
we're
mean,
celebrating women and things are changing.
Kat, it's positive. I mean,
It's positive.
ultimately, which is at the end of the day, we have these conversations like everything could be a little bit better. Everything could be a
Right.
little bit better. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes we listen to ourselves in this podcast like we can be a little bit better than we were, but
Yeah.
that's just life. Everybody, and we feel the same way. Like we are highlighting what's going on, and ultimately, I think we embody like yes, we did a show to highlight Women's History Month, but we are a podcast talking about things in women's sports every week, and
Hmm.
we're not confined to March.
Right.
We are a part of making sure that that history is highlighted. So that's the positive I feel like to take away is that we already kind of doing the positive. The fact that we're
Right.
talking about it is positive.
Hmm.
How many
And
podcasts out here actually telling the world like there needs to be one league in North America for women in hockey, and the NHL needs to get their heads out of their asses and make sure it happens. So, I mean, these are positive. Don't feel like you got it. I think ultimately what we do is positive.
it's positive. And if you want to listen to more positive episodes about women in sport and female athletes, you can check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you found this. There's lots of episodes if this is your first one.
Yeah.
And if you want to get in touch with us, you can shoot us an email at inleaguepod@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram at shescores.ca, and any contact info for us and for the podcast and for She Scores Media as an organization is listed in the description box of the episode. So we will see you next week for episode 9. Thank you so much.